today. The webinar will be starting soon, and gentle reminder to please keep your microphones muted. The main chat box will also be disabled during this time. If you face any technical issues, please send a message to the user named tech support. And if you have any questions at any point in time, please post them to the user named Q&A. Thank you for your patience, and we will be starting really soon. Just admitting a few more people. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. Let's go live. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Science Behind Animal Behavior webinar series, where we'll be focusing on the social behavior of the domestic cat. We're really excited to welcome back again Dr. Jenna Kiddie as our speaker for our webinar today. Jenna is an experienced international animal behavior and welfare specialist and has a PhD from the Royal Veterinary College, London. Her work has been published in international peer-reviewed scientific journals, and she has presented at international scientific and industry conferences. Jenna is currently a visiting research fellow at the University of Cumbria, previously holding a senior lecturer role at Anglia Ruskin University and a teaching fellow position at the Royal Dick School of Veterinary Studies. She was also a senior clinical training scholar in cat behavior and welfare at the Bristol Veterinary School. We are very, very pleased to have her with us today and to tap on her invaluable experience on the social behavior of cats. I'm sure all of you in this Zoom call are really keen to ask her questions, and you can do so at any time during the session by typing your questions into the chat box to the user named Q&A. And a gentle reminder again to please mute your microphones as well. Thank you very much. And without further ado, I'll pass the mic on to Jenna. Jenna, please.
Thanks very much, Audrey. Hopefully you can all see my slides now. Yes, brilliant. So yeah, thank you so much for that lovely introduction and a warm welcome to all of you. So this webinar will introduce you to the domestication of the cat and how this natural history still has a significant impact on the social behaviour of the cats that we know and love today. So you'll learn when and how cats bond with each other, with others of their own kind, as well as with people, and what we as owners can do to help support their social groupings. So it's useful to look at the history of the cat and what has occurred over their evolutionary history that has resulted in its current biology and behavioural repertoire. So this requires us to think about the ethology of the ancestral species, which is the African wildcat, and how the cat was domesticated. So this will give us a better idea, a better understanding of the social behaviour of cats and what we can do to help support our cats if we have more than one living in our household, so how we can support multi-cat households, as well as our own relationship with our cats. We'll have time for questions at the end, but please do note that I won't be able to give any specific advice regarding individual cats. The shortest cat behaviour consultation I've ever given was at least 2 hours long, because I've got to ask lots of really detailed questions before I can give appropriate advice. And obviously that's not going to be possible today. I also only give advice to owners after their cat's been checked over by their vet, because there's lots of medical conditions, including pain, that can have a huge influence on a cat's behaviour. So any underlying health concerns must first be ruled out or identified and managed appropriately before addressing any behavioural concerns. So bear that in mind when you're typing up your questions. Okay, so by the end of this webinar, I hope that you'll be able to describe the ethology underlying social behaviour in cats and to have some ideas as to how you can practically support your cat, your own cats socially. So let's start off thinking about ethology then. So what does this term actually mean? Well, it refers to the normal behaviour of a species, and that will have developed because of the environment that the species evolved in. And as you'll see, the domestic cat is actually a very young species, evolutionary speaking, and they haven't actually changed that much in terms of behaviour from their ancestral species. So thinking about the behaviour of the ancestral species first can actually help us understand quite a lot about how our domestic cats behave. So it's thought that both the Near Eastern and Egyptian populations of Felis sylvestris libica, or the Near Eastern and African wildcat, are the main ancestors of our domestic cat. And this wildcat, the African wildcat, is actually still found in the wild today. This is a photo of it on the slide. And you can see that they're a small cat which look very similar to our tabby cats that we know and love in terms of their colouring, although you can see they're slightly a bit more sandy in colour and slightly less striped than a typical tabby that we would meet. Now, the wildcat is a solitary hunter, which means that they seek out food by themselves. So they go out hunting by themselves, and they usually do so at dusk and dawn. So they tend to hunt when it's a bit darker rather than in the middle of the daytime. They lack a strict hierarchical social structure, with individuals being well dispersed across the savannah, so the area that they live in. And this is because they hunt relatively sparsely distributed prey. So the rodents that they hunt are sort of spread out across the savannah. So in order to access enough prey, so in order to hunt enough prey to survive, individual wildcats have to maintain quite large territories. So they have to defend territories from other cats in order to hunt enough food to survive. It's believed that the African wildcats developed a mutually beneficial relationship with early farming communities in the Fertile Crescent, which is an area of the Mediterranean during the Neolithic period. And about 11,000 years ago, the Natuvians invented agriculture in this area of the Fertile Crescent. And they started to establish grain stores to store the grains that the crops that they were growing. Now, these grain stores presented a new food source for the rodents living in the savannas. And that meant that the rodents who were taking advantage of this new food source were suddenly being concentrated in one area rather than being distributed across the savannah. And this in turn led to a concentrated food source for the African wildcats. So this has meant that we've ended up with two distinct groups of African wildcat. One being those that were not genetically tolerant of living in close proximity to other cats, who stayed out on the savannas, living out in the savannas, following their sort of traditional natural history. And they've actually changed very little in the ensuing time. And then the other group are made up of those African wildcats who were genetically tolerant of living in close proximity to other cats and also humans, and who could take advantage of this new concentrated food source around the grain stores, so around human settlements. But despite more than 10,000 years of living in close association with people and undergoing the process of domestication, domestic cats still behave very similarly to their wild ancestors. However, as we'll see, they have developed some differences, notably in their social behaviour. So historically, domestic cats were considered to be an asocial, solitary species that had no need for companionship and preferred to be alone. And this perception probably arose because the domestic cat evolved as a solitary hunter in contrast to the dog, which is a social hunter. So for a species that hunts alone, like the domestic cat, as I've said, the maintenance of a hunting territory is evolutionarily very important. And most cats will be highly motivated to defend a territory, even now that they can live in social groups. But cats need a range of behavioural strategies to ensure that they're able to maintain their territories without coming into conflict with other cats. So the reason for this is to minimise injury from fighting. But when resources allow, feral domestic cats can form complex matrilineal societies, which we generally call colonies. And within these colonies, there's extensive cooperation between adult females in the care and rearing of the kittens. So this is beneficial from a genetic point of view because most of the females tend to be related. So if they help rear each other as young, they're helping to pass on their own genes. So in larger colonies, there tends to be several queens, so several adult females who are, as I said, often related to each other. And they help each other out in lots of different ways to ensure the survival of their kittens. So for example, let's think about two females. Female A might be off hunting and she will leave her kittens with female B, and female B will help groom the kittens, nurse them, and guard them when the other mum is off out hunting alone. But then when it comes to the second female, female B, when she wants to go out to hunt, then female A will reciprocate and she'll look after her kittens as well as her own. So lots of cooperative care within these societies, within these feral communities that are mostly made up of related females. But there's greater diversity in the social groupings of males. So some males might spend most of their time with one particular group of females and will develop strong social bonds with them, while other males won't form strong affiliations with any particular group or individual female, but instead they might have larger home ranges that actually overlap with a number of home ranges of different female groups. So if we think about the kittens themselves, if they're raised in an environment where food sources are widely distributed, or there are insufficient food resources to support many adults, then the kittens will start to disperse upon reaching maturity to keep the family group at a size that the environment can support in terms of the number of sources available. Family groups are also better able to defend the resource from unfamiliar cats. So if there is enough food and other resources to go around, then it makes sense for them to form colonies and to live in family groups. But if there isn't enough food to go around, then obviously that could lead to starvation. So it makes sense for the group to disperse slightly to reflect the amount of food that is available. So we tend to see the colony size and number of cats making up the social groups and being determined by existing food resources. And the size of the colony tends to be proportional to the amount of food available in the local environment. So as I've said, one of the big changes between the African wildcat and the domestic cat is their ability to form very close social bonds with other cats, so members of the same social group. And this tends to happen most easily between litter mates or even unrelated kittens, but they have to have grown up together. They have to have been raised together to really make that social bond successful for them to actually regard each other as being family or close family or bonded individuals. The bonds between these individuals are maintained through a number of friendly behaviours, or what we call affiliative behaviours. So these are allo grooming, allo rubbing, and sleeping curled up with each other. So the term allo just means that they do it to another individual. So we see cats grooming each other and we see them rubbing against each other. So allo rubbing is where cats rub against each other, and this allows the transfer of scent between individuals. So every individual cat has their own individual scent profile, but when they rub against each other, they're mixing up those scents or swapping those scents between each other, and that leads to a group scent profile, which allows cats to recognize each other as individuals, but also as members of the same social group. And we most often see this behavior, this rubbing behavior, upon greeting. So for example, when another cat has returned to the core area from a hunting trip. And we also see them do it to us as owners, maybe when we've come home from work or we've just got out of bed, they might rub around our ankles, which is a lovely behavior. I particularly like it when my cat does that. And then if we think about aggression between cats, it's actually quite rare within feral colonies, within social groups. Aggressive incidents are very infrequent. And this is because there's a lack of competition over resources. I've just said that the size of the feral group, the feral colony, will reflect the amount of food and other resources available. So the cats aren't needing to come into conflict with each other when they're hunting and utilizing other resources. But aggression can ensue if competition is created by restricting access to resources. And unfortunately, this is becoming more and more common as we acquire more and more cats and the population densities of cats increase. And this is particularly the case when we introduce a new cat into our household, which is a very difficult thing to achieve successfully. And it's because the cats will likely see each other or newcomers as a threat because they have no way of recognizing each other as being part of the same social group. And that's even when we're providing enough food for them. So as a result, severe aggression can be seen between existing cats and new cats, and they will be trying to chase the other one away from their territory because in their heads, a newcomer might lead to a lack of food and reduce their chances of survival. And one reason for this high level of distress around new individuals is that cats haven't evolved the ability to show complex visual signaling that allows them to diffuse situations of conflict. So if any of you are familiar with dogs, you'll be aware that they have an amazing range of facial expressions and body postures that can get them out of situations of conflict. So if two dogs were to maybe be having a disagreement about who could access a resource, one of them could make themselves look really small, so crouching, tucking their tail under, averting their gaze, turning their head away, pulling their ears back. And what they're saying through their body language is, I'm no threat to you, please leave me alone. And that means that they don't have to escalate to using aggression. They can just sort out conflict using their body language. As I say, cats don't have these, what we call appeasement gestures. They can't use their body language to diffuse conflict once they've come face to face with another cat in a situation of competition over a resource. And how cats deal with competition is that they avoid coming into physical contact with each other in the first place by using scent. So they'll urine mark, for example, out in their hunting territories to say, I'm using the hunting territory now, wait your turn, come back later when I'm finished. And that is how they avoid coming into physical contact and conflict with each other. That obviously does become harder with the more cats that we add into our neighborhoods, and especially when we control their movement. So maybe we're only letting them out at certain times of the day rather than having sort of 24-hour access to the outside. It's much more difficult for them to create timetables of who uses the territory when. So if a cat did come across another cat outside, and I'm sure you've all seen this happen, what tends to happen is they get into a standoff, which tends to be very, very noisy. So you'll have two cats staring at each other. One of them might be yowling, the other one might also be yowling, or they might be quiet. I tend to find there's usually one who's much noisier than the other. And they can just stand there for ages, sort of crouching, staring at each other and yelling at each other. And what has to happen for them to resolve this is for one cat to make themselves really, really small in the hopes that the other cat will forget that they're there and move off and do something else. Or they have to slowly back away in order to remove themselves from the situation. And they have to do this really slowly, very, very carefully. If they were to turn around and run, then that might actually trigger a chase response from the other cat. So the other cat will chase after them and most likely bite them on the bottom. And vets, if there's any vets in the audience, or if you know any vets, then they unfortunately they do actually have to treat quite a lot of bite abscesses, which tend to occur around this sort of tail area of the cat. But aggression between cats isn't always obvious, at least not to us. So they do use a lot of passive aggression, and this includes staring at other cats or blocking access to resources. And this is really subtle from our perspective. So it's something that we might actually miss quite a lot in our own cats. Especially if you think, well, we're not very good at passive aggression as humans. Well, some people are very good at it, but you might not pick it up if someone else is being passively aggressive to you. But when we're observing our cats, because cats are so much shorter than us, and their gaze is so much lower than our gaze, we might not notice if they're staring at each other. We might also think, well, the cat's just sitting in the doorway because that's a good place for them to sit. But we might not actually realize that there are resources beyond that doorway that the cat is actually blocking access to or controlling the movement of the other cats in the household. And some forms of aggression, which might be a bit more active, can sometimes also be mistaken for play. So I quite often hear people say, oh, my cats love chasing each other, or they might bat each other with a paw. And I think sometimes a lot of this play is actually aggression, that the cats aren't playing, they're not having a good time, but they are actually feeling threatened by each other, and they're trying to chase each other off. It is quite difficult for a lot of people to determine whether their cats are playing or actually showing aggression to each other. So what I generally ask is for the owner to observe their cats and ask, do my cats ever groom each other? Do they ever rub against each other? Do they ever sleep curled up or touching each other? And if the answer to all of those questions are no, then the chances are they're not playing with each other. It might actually be aggression, and they might actually be feeling quite stressed or distressed with the presence of the other cat. So I've devised a little bit of an activity for you to do with your own cats at home. I wouldn't suggest doing it now, but you can maybe do it over the weekend if you have some time. So if you have more than one cat in your home, then if you haven't already done this, then it's a really good idea to think about how many social groups you actually have in your house. So for every pair of cats, think about, do they rub against each other? Do they groom each other? Do they sleep in close physical contact? So are they actually touching each other when they're sleeping? So what you could do is write down all of your cats' names on a piece of paper and then draw lines between them if they show any of these behaviors towards each other. So I've done a few examples. So I've imagined that we have a household of 5 cats: Fluffy, Rosie, Lucky, Samson, and Gordy. And in this instance, we haven't observed any friendly behaviors between the 5 cats. So this implies that there are 5 individual social groups within this household, each social group being made up of 1 solitary cat. And then in this example, we can see that Fluffy, Lucky, and Rosie all show friendly behaviors towards each other, but Samson and Gordy don't. So the 3, Fluffy, Lucky, and Rosie, don't engage in friendly behaviors with Gordy or Samson, and Samson and Gordy also don't show friendly behaviors towards each other. So we can see that this household has 3 social groups. So we've got Fluffy, Lucky, and Rosie in 1 social group, and Samson and Gordy in another, in their own social groups. But we can sometimes see what we call social butterflies. So Rosie, for instance, in this example, is in a social group with Fluffy and Lucky, but she's also in a separate social group with Gordy. And poor old Samson is still a solitary cat, remaining in a social group all by himself. So we've got 3 social groups here, but Rosie actually straddles across 2 of them. And then in my last example, we can see that every single cat is showing friendly behaviors towards each other. So this owner is very lucky that they've ended up with a social group of all 5 cats. And I say lucky because this is actually quite a rarity for all cats and for all 5 cats in a household to get on with each other. Okay. But as I say, that owner was very lucky because it's actually very difficult to introduce new cats into a household, especially when they're adults or they're even kittens who are a little bit older. It's very difficult to introduce new cats. And it can be a major source of distress for the resident cats, but also the new cats coming into the household. And it can lead to a range of behavioural problems, such as aggression, spraying, toileting outside of the litter box, or even over grooming and hurting themselves. So they're grooming to the point of pulling out their hair or licking their skin so it becomes sore. And having a large number of cats within a confined area, or adding or removing cats, or having insufficient access to resources are all common causes of individuals displaying some of these behavioural indicators of distress. So it's really important that as owners, we stop and think about what is in our cat's interests before we add extra cats into our households. But what should you do if you've already got more than one social group in your household? So maybe over the weekend, you have a look at your cats and you create that social network and you found that, oh, I've actually got more than one social group in my house. How can you support them? So I'm going to give you some tips now as to how you can do this. So the first tip is to provide multiple well-distributed key environmental resources around your home. So as I've said, in a multi-cat household, a cat might be part of a social group or they might behave as a solitary cat. And this means that several social groups can end up living under the one roof, so in the one home. And we need to meet the needs of the individual cats and the individual social groups. So in either circumstance, whether you have a solitary cat or a social group or a mix, then we need to ensure that there's sufficient access to resources. So the resources have to be separated, physically separated, so that all cats can access the resources without coming into competition with each other, without coming into conflict with each other. So these key resources should be available in multiple and physically separate locations, which can be difficult to achieve, but to increase or optimize the chances of your cats not showing aggression or not feeling distressed by the presence of other cats. It's really important that we try to achieve this as much as possible. So the key environmental resources include the cat's feeding, drinking, toileting, claw scratching, play, and resting and sleeping areas or opportunities to carry out these behaviours. So what this means then, that each group in the household, so each social group in your house should have physically separate resources so that they don't have to share access with other social groups or members of a different social group. And a general rule of thumb is that we provide one resource per cat or per group plus one. So this means that if you have 2 social groups, you need to have 3 litter boxes. And all 3 litter boxes really need to be well spaced out. So they need to be physically separate from each other and ideally in different rooms. One slight deviation from the rule is that every individual really needs to have their own food and water bowl. So don't provide one per social group. Each individual does really need to have their own access to food and water. Remember that cats are solitary hunters, so they wouldn't choose to eat near to other cats. So that can be quite a distressing and uncomfortable situation for them if they're having to eat close to other cats. So again, these ideally would be in different rooms of the house, or at least as well spaced out as is possible given the layout of your homes. Also, food and water bowls and litter boxes shouldn't be grouped together. So even if you have grouped together each cat's resource into physically separated areas, so they don't have to walk past another cat to access the resources, we still need to space out each of the cat's resources. So don't be tempted to line up each cat's litter box, food bowl, and water bowl all against one wall. We still need to separate them out within each cat's sort of core area. And this is because cats like to, well, they don't like to drink and eat near. They don't like their food and water bowls to be close to each other, and they don't like their litter boxes to be close to their food, for instance, because of hygiene reasons and disease and parasite transmission. So they like to have these resources well spaced out. If you keep your cats in cages, then the cages need to be large enough as well to allow resources to be spread out. This is as important, if not more so, in a cage than it is in a home environment, because there are generally less options for a cat to take themselves away from other cats that they might be sharing that space with. So this includes resting and hiding areas, as well as litter box, food and water, and they should also be having access to scratching posts and toys as well. So again, toileting areas need to be as far away from food and water dishes as possible, as much as the cage environment allows. So you might be thinking to yourself round about now that having any more than just 1 or 2 cats in your home might be very difficult to manage. And that is very true. It is difficult to manage more than 1 cat in a home from the cat's perspective. But we can get creative about how we can manage the environments for larger groups of cats if necessary. For example, utilizing 3D space. So I want to talk a little bit more about territory. So we can talk about vertical space or utilizing the 3D space in a bit more detail. So as I've said, cats are considered territorial. They have to defend a large territory from other cats in order to hunt enough food to survive. And obviously our cats, if we own them in our homes, then they don't actually have to do this because we are feeding them enough food. But in their cat brains, which haven't, their expectations about keeping a territory hasn't actually changed that much from the African wildcats, they are still, in the most cases, highly motivated to defend a territory from another cat. So these territories are split into 2 areas. We have the core area where the cat spends most of their time relaxing and carrying out more vulnerable behaviors like grooming and resting. And then there's the main hunting area where they go out and they do all their hunting. But within these areas, they're also vulnerable to attack from predators and other cats. So if we look at the picture on the top picture on the slide, we can see that territories might not actually be continuous areas. So for instance, each of these colors are, let me try to use my pen or laser pointer here. Each of these colors represent a different cat in this neighborhood. So if we look at the blue cat, they've got quite a, it's a large territory, but it's very well used. You can see from all the squiggly lines that the cat is patrolling this area, using this area quite a lot. And they're not coming into contact too much with other cats. They do share a border with the yellow cat here, so they might have to be on their guard a little bit more in this area. But generally, it's quite a nice territory that looks like it's relatively easy to move around in. If we look at the yellow cat, their territory is much more spaced out. So it's less concentrated, it's more dispersed across the neighborhood. And if we look at the red cat, they've got 2 different territories, 2 hunting areas that they're using, but they actually have to cross through 2 other cats' territories in order to access their 2 different hunting areas. So that could be quite difficult for them to do so safely. And actually we can see that the red line goes up into the yellow cat's territory as well. So this red cat is coming across a lot of other cats on their daily routes outside. So potentially coming across quite a few other cats that could cause them, that they could be getting into fights with. So remember I said that territories, they try to avoid coming into conflict with other cats by spraying urine, which acts like a traffic light system so that only one cat is using each territory at a time. Another way that cats can safely travel between different areas, so for example, the red cat, they often use raised passageways to travel between their different hunting sites. So being up high gives them a good view of their surroundings, so they can see potential sources of threat, and they can actually also see ways of escape. So safe routes that they can avoid the predator or the other cat from. And the tops of fences or walls or even garage roofs or covered walkways in your housing complexes, these are all ways that cats can move around their area but at a height, and that helps them feel safe. So being up high, as I say, makes cats feel safe. So this is something that we can help achieve inside our homes as well. It doesn't just happen outside when cats are out hunting. So we can utilize the vertical space in our homes as much as possible. So we can do this using shelves or walkways or cat trees or even the tops of our own furniture. So for instance, the cat in the top right-hand photo is using the owners just cleared a space on top of the chest of drawers there and put a nice comfy bed up there for the cat. It's in the corner of the room so the cat can see the whole room, all the activities in the family, other cats. They can see the doorway so they can see people coming and going. But then the cats in the other photos, these are all sort of cat specific items of furniture that have been put in, so especially for the cats. So the one on the left is quite simple. There's a shelf above the doorway and a very tall scratching tree that the cat can sort of climb up in order to access the shelf above the door. And then the one in the middle is much more complex, that the owner has devoted one whole wall of her sitting room to a series of shelves and ramps and scratching posts for her cats. And then we can also see just a nice warm hammock beside a radiator that an older cat might enjoy. So they're in a raised up area, but it's also nice and cozy for them. So we also need to think about other types of safe spaces for cats. So they don't have to all be up high, but they do need to have areas that are cozy and comfy for them to have a snooze in, which they will do if they're feeling nice and relaxed. So some considerations for these elevated spaces or other cozy sleeping places for our cats. They need to be, as always, spread out so that cats can access a comfy sleeping area without having to walk past another cat. So remember that general rule of thumb, we need one bed per cat plus one to give them some choice. These need to be well spaced out so the cats don't have to pass another cat to access it. If we're using shelves and ramps, then they have to be long enough and wide enough to allow a whole cat to comfortably sit on it or lie down on it, stretch out on it, turn around on it. And they have to be safe in terms of the surface. So we can see in this example on the slides that the owner has stuck short pile carpet onto all of the surfaces to make sure that they're non-slip. So if the cats are running and jumping around, they're not going to slide and hurt themselves or even slide right off the surface. We also have to make sure that the cats never feel trapped, so that there's always more than one entrance or one exit to any of these raised areas or any sort of enclosed beds, so that if the cats don't get on together and another cat approaches them when they're in this area, that they can actually exit in another direction. They don't have to walk past another cat to leave that area. Some cats, we have to think carefully that anything that we design for our cats or provide for our cats in terms of safe places, whether they're nice cozy bed or an elevated walkway, that they are actually accessible to the cats that we have in our homes. So for instance, kittens or older cats who might have limited mobility might not be able to access a high shelf like one of the ones that we saw in the first photo. So any boxes or perches or beds or shelves that we're providing for them, they need to be placed at a relatively low height, or that they can access them through a series of sort of shelves or ramps so that they can easily access them. And we also want to make sure that we've taken other hazards into account, for instance, that there's no sharp edges, or if the cats are jumping between different levels, they're not going to hit their backs or their heads off the level above them. But we also can get creative about what kind of beds we give our cats. We can even give our cats their cat carriers. So we can, rather than only bringing them out when we go to take our cats to the vet, we can actually just leave them out all of the time. And that gives them an extra option for to use as a bed. And it also means that our cats are more comfortable and confident with that enclosed space, so that if we do need to take them to the vet, that they're more confident with that, and it becomes a portable, safe place for them. That reduces stress if you do need to move them between environments or take them to the vet. Okay, so the next top tip I'm going to give you is to provide an environment that respects the importance of the cat's sense of smell. So the olfactory system is very important to cats. They have a great sense of smell, and unlike humans, they will use olfactory and chemical information to evaluate their surroundings and to maximize their sense of security and comfort. So olfactory information involves lots of different smells that they detect through their nose, and chemical information is detected by the vomeronasal organ, which is an organ that's situated in the roof of their mouth, right behind the top incisors, their front teeth. And what they do is they suck in air through their mouth by making this funny face, this funny grimace face that we call the Flehmen response. They suck in air and that goes up into the vomeronasal organ, and that is where they can detect pheromones, which are chemicals that convey information between individuals of the same species. So they use scent for lots of different reasons. They can use odors to detect prey. They also use scent marking, as I've said, for distant communication between cats, for example, when they can use the hunting areas. Cats also use scent to orientate themselves in their environment. So everywhere the cat goes, they're depositing scent from their paws and from other parts of their body. And they also leave scent in different parts of their territory that these different, depending on where they've been deposited, so what scent glands of the body they've been deposited from, they actually mean different things to the cat. So for example, a cat rubbing their cheek and their bodies on different bits of different items of furniture in your home, such as your sofa or your coffee tables, the scent that's deposited can actually establish the boundaries of their core living area. And the scent is associated with feelings of security and safety. So it's important that owners are mindful of these different scents. We're completely oblivious to them. We can't smell these scents that the cat's depositing around the environment, but it's so important for them. It really helps them feel safe and secure within our homes. So we should try not to disrupt these scent profiles that the cats are creating for themselves. So this means that we have to allow cats the opportunity to scent mark within the home by facial rubbing, but also scratching. So do make sure that they have a scratching post. This is not only good for claw and muscle health, but it's also a way for them to scent mark within their home, and will hopefully stop them from scratching on your sofas. But again, remember, these have to be well distributed around the home. If you are giving your cats scratching posts, so that cats can access their own scratching posts in their own core areas. And try not to to be too heavily into your cleaning. So, cleaning legs of coffee tables and things, maybe don't do that quite so often, so that your cat's facial rubbings are maintained on the sides of your furniture as well. And that will help them feel nice and safe. If we think about the cat's group scent profile, so remember, cats recognize each other through their individual scents, but also they can recognize each other as being members of the same social group through how they smell. Then we can sometimes see problems if one cat has been out of the household and is coming back into the house, because they might smell different, and that can disrupt the social group scent, the social group's scent profile, which actually, to the cat staying in the house, they might think, oh, there's a completely strange new cat coming in. They might not recognize that it's actually their friend coming back into the house. And this is most likely to occur after a visit to the vets, where the cat who's been to the vet might come home smelling very strangely of medications, antiseptics, cleaners, etc. And this can sometimes actually lead to aggression between the two cats, where the cat isn't allowed back into the social group. So it can actually be quite helpful to try to arrange routine veterinary visits for all cats at once. But if one cat has to stay away for any length of time, for example, if they've been hospitalized at the vets, then you can buy a synthetic feline pheromone diffuser. You can buy that from your vets or a pet shop or online, and you can plug that in at home, and that can help maintain the existing scent profile and aid reintegration with other cats into the household. But I do advise keeping the returning cat in a separate room, just to make sure everyone's nice and calm, and allow them to pick up scent, to lose that weird vet smell, and to pick up the scent of the home again before allowing them back into the house with the other cats. And we can also think about scent when introducing new cats into our home. So I would advise very strongly that before you get a new cat, to think about the layout of your home. Is it possible to provide well spaced out resources for all of your cats, remembering that if you're introducing especially an adult cat into your home, the chances are they will end up being a solitary cat, forming their own social group by themselves. So make sure that you can actually provide for each individual cat or a social group of cats individually within your household, with all of their resources well spaced out. So if you've thought about that and you've still decided that it's a good idea to bring a new cat home, then you can actually start this group scent profile creation before the new cat even comes home. So if that's, for instance, think that you're getting a new cat from a breeder, you can ask the breeder to take some bedding from your existing cats, so a blanket or something that your existing cats have slept on, give it to the breeder, ask the breeder to place it somewhere that the new cat is likely to come across, so not too close to their resources, so for example their bed or litter box or food, but somewhere that they're likely to come across so that they can smell the scent of your cat and start to get used to that smell. And then the breeder can give you something that also smells of the new cat, so that you can do the same with your cats at home. While you're doing this, you can set up a room or a separate area within your home with all of your new cat's resources, remembering that those resources have to still be separated from each other within that room. So the litter box and the food and the water have to be separate from each other. Then bring the new cat and put them in that room. And then you can still continue the scent swapping, so swapping over their bedding or blankets that they've slept on, so that they're getting used to the smell of the other cats. They're learning that it's nothing to be worried about. If you do see any signs of avoidance or aggression, then keep going. Don't even think about introducing them physically, so face to face, until you stop seeing any signs of avoidance or aggression towards the blanket that smells of the other cats. But as long as they aren't showing any negative signs towards the blankets, then you can start to open up the house. So just for brief periods to begin with, you can open the door and allow the new cat to come out at their own pace to investigate the rest of the house and maybe even meet some of the other cats. Make sure that you're there to supervise. If there are any problems, if you see the cats stiffening or their tails start to flick, then you know that they're not happy, and they might actually start to show aggression to each other. So get in there early and encourage the new cat to go back into their room and continue to swap scents for longer before trying to introduce them to each other again. And gradually over time, you can leave the door open for longer and longer periods, again, supervising your cats to make sure that they're not showing any kind of passive or active aggression towards each other. And maybe you could even groom them or play with them if they enjoy that in the presence of the other cats, so that they associate the presence of the other cats with something positive. But do remember to maintain that separate core area for the new cat, because even if they seem to be getting on well with the other cats, the maintenance of that good relationship might be based on the fact that they have their own resources that they can use. So don't take away those extra resources, because you might inadvertently put pressure on the social relationship between those cats. Okay, so I want to now give you some tips on how you can get the most out of your cat-human relationship, thinking predominantly about the cat's welfare and the human-cat relationship from their perspective. Oops, so sorry. Oh my goodness. Oops, sorry about that. So the cats have different behavioral development periods from before they're actually born right up into adulthood. But the behavioral development period that I particularly want to talk to you about is the socialization period, because this is probably the most relevant developmental period to owners who are thinking about acquiring a new cat. So the socialization period is the most sensitive period of behavioral development in the cat. And anything that the cat experiences regularly and positively during this socialization period is likely to be accepted as safe and normal throughout life. However, anything that they don't experience is likely to elicit a fear response if they experience it later in life. So this period occurs roughly between 2 and 7 or 2 and 8 weeks of age in kittens, although their capacity for learning remains high throughout this whole period. Their responses to new things and situations does change within this first 2 months of life. So studies have shown that before 6 weeks of age in kittens, they're generally very willing to approach new things, but after the age of 6 weeks, they're more likely to show avoidance of new situations and new objects. So we have to be very careful about introducing our kittens to new things after the age of 6 weeks. And if we think about it, this actually coincides roughly with weaning, the age of weaning, when the kittens will naturally become more adventurous and they'll want to explore their environment. So they'll start leaving the safety of their nests, which makes sense, because if they were to meet anything new outside of the nest area, then it could potentially be dangerous. Whereas anything that they've met before within the nest area, they can be fairly sure that that is something safe and nothing to be worried about, because their mum would have ensured that the nest area was safe. So as I've said, where cats don't experience particular things during the first 2 months of life, they're more likely to be fearful of them if they do encounter these things later on. And this includes people. So as sad as it is, and as much as we would wish it to be otherwise, cats don't have an inbuilt need to be with people. They have to learn that humans are safe and pleasant to be around. Cats who are frightened of whatever it is, they have different ways to cope with their fear. So they can try to avoid what's scaring them, or they can use aggression to try to make that thing move away. So for instance, if it's a person they're scared of, they can try to hide from the person, or they can use aggression to force the person to back off and leave them alone. Sometimes, so if they can't actually reach the person that's worrying them, then they might show some unexpected behaviors, a behavior that we might not expect to see in that context. For example, grooming. This is what we call a displacement behavior. or they might redirect their aggression onto another target that is easier to reach. And this might be another cat in the home, or it might be another person that is nearby. So we have to make sure that kittens are exposed to as much as possible to prepare them for their domestic life during the first 2 months of life. And if you are looking to get a new kitten, then it's important that you think about what their early life experiences were like and try to match that with your own needs and your own expectations. So what is your lifestyle? Do you live in a really busy household with lots of children running about and lots of noise and lots of coming and going? If you live in that kind of household, then it's a good idea to get a kitten who was raised in that kind of household. A kitten who was raised in a very quiet, non-chaotic environment might find it really stressful and very difficult to adapt to a noisy, chaotic household. And vice versa, if you live by yourself and you don't really listen to music or you don't watch a TV, you just like the quiet life, then getting a kitten who was raised in a really busy, chaotic environment might cope. They might get quite frustrated that things in your house are actually quite quiet. They might be expecting lots of exciting things all the time and put extra demands on you. So have a think about where you're getting your kitten from and what their early life experiences and therefore their expectations are. But regardless, all cats, all kittens need to be introduced to a wide range of people so that they can generalize what people are. Obviously, people come in all different shapes and sizes, so kittens need to learn this. And we think that if we can introduce kittens to at least 4 people during their socialization period, then they can generalize across people as a whole. But they do need to meet people who look different and sound different and smell different. So we want to introduce them to people of different ages, different genders, different appearances, and they have to learn that it's okay to be handled by people as well. So for example, being stroked, cuddled, and picked up. But do remember that genetics can also play a part. So if it's possible to meet the parents, then do so. So if the parents are really frightened, maybe they're using avoidance or using aggression, then there's a chance that the kitten will grow up like that as well. So maybe think about only getting a kitten from friendly parents. And as long as they've received adequate socialization with people at this very young age, so between sort of 2 and 8 weeks of age, then it's likely that they will benefit from regular, friendly, and predictable social interactions with you. This won't be the case for non-socialized cats. So for example, feral cats or cats who are born and raised outdoors, like your community cat, some of your community cats, they might really struggle with close human interaction and might find that very stressful and threatening. But for those cats who do enjoy interactions with people, a lot of cats still prefer to have quite short bursts of interaction. So they might just want to come over, say hi. They might want to be stroked, they might not actually. But us as people, we tend to think, right, I'm going to sit down in front of the TV for the rest of the evening. Wouldn't it be lovely if my cat sat on my lap and I could stroke them for the next hour? That doesn't necessarily match with the cat's expectations of what a social interaction should be. So we have to remember that they might actually just want a quick pet and then be left to go about their own business. Obviously, every cat is an individual, so it's important to get to know what their preferences are for frequency and duration and intensity of those social interactions. So it's important that cats are able to initiate, moderate, and end their interactions with people. So never force a cat to interact with you. You know, if they're moving away from you, don't try to follow them. But what you can do is you can get down low to their level, call them over. If they come over, let them sniff your hands first. Don't go straight into stroking them because that might startle them. And I found that most cats do want to just briefly sniff your hand first, and then they'll accept a stroke more easily. So maybe just give them a few strokes around the head area, which is generally where they prefer. They tend to prefer it more than around the tail area. Stroke them for maybe 3 seconds or so and then stop. And then see what they do. If they move away, that's fine, let them move away. But if they nudge your finger or your hand, or they sniff your hand, then maybe give them some more strokes for another 3 seconds or so. So this is what we call the consent test. You're asking them, is it okay for me to carry on stroking you, or would you prefer for me to stop and for you to go and do something else? So we need to learn our cat's preferences. We need to determine how much they like human interactions, what kind of human interactions they like. And if we try to respect these, then we're more likely to build a really strong bond with them. To prevent tension within multi-cat households, then every cat should have the opportunity to interact with you individually without the intervention of other cats. And do remember that cats at different life stages might require different types of social interaction. So for example, kittens might enjoy long interactive play sessions, whereas an older cat might enjoy shorter play sessions. And their style of play usually changes about 2 or 3 years of age, so you might see it change around then. And also as they grow older, they might be less willing to be picked up, or they might spend less time on your lap. Maybe they prefer to just sit beside you and have shorter stroking sessions. So do keep an eye on your cat's body language, use your consent tests, and if you do see any sudden changes in their behavior, then do speak to your vet about that, because it could be that if they used to enjoy being stroked, but all of a sudden they're turning around and growling at you, or they're not sitting on your lap all of a sudden, then it could be maybe they've got an underlying medical condition, maybe they're in pain. So any kind of sudden change of behavior, it's a good idea to get your cat checked out by the vet. And then for cats who maybe don't like to be stroked, you can also still interact with them by playing with them, or you can use training. So that means that you can interact with them without actually touching them. So in this photo, this cat is being target trained. It's a great way to give them physical and mental stimulation without you having to touch them. So if you're interested in this, I'd recommend that you look on YouTube for some examples of easy tricks that you can teach your cat that would be really enjoyable for them, or something more useful actually that your cat will enjoy learning but is actually useful for you and your cat. For example, teaching them to have their nails clipped and to stay relaxed with that activity. So in summary then, when we're thinking about our cat's social behavior, it's really important to remember that they evolved from a solitary species. They evolved to hunt by themselves and to maintain and defend a large territory from other cats. Do remember, as well as being predators, they are also prey species. So they will feel vulnerable to attack from other cats, but also predators. And they do feel vulnerable around other cats that they're not members of the same social group as, particularly because they lack the complex visual signaling system, the communication system that humans have and then say dogs have, that allows them to get out of situations of social conflict. They would much prefer to rely on olfactory communication, so scent marking, to avoid coming into face-to-face contact with other cats in the first place. So once they get into that face-to-face conflict, it's very difficult for them to resolve that without fighting and potentially ending up injured. So we can, to help with this, we can respect their scent marking by not cleaning away all their facial rubbings, giving them lots of elevated vantage points that they can travel around your house by, so they're not having to pass each other at the same level, and allowing them to survey their surroundings and sleep in a place that they feel safe. And most importantly, perhaps, ensuring that all of their resources are plentiful, so there's enough for the cats to access one each, and then maybe even have an extra one for choice, and to make sure that these are well spaced out around your home so that cats aren't having to pass each other to access the resources. So I think we have time for questions now. Do remember that I won't be able to give you really specific advice regarding your individual cats, but hopefully I'll be able to give you some general advice that you can maybe adapt to suit yourselves.
Thank you so much, Jenna. The talk was certainly very, very enlightening. I personally enjoyed it so very much, and we've learned so much about cat bonding. We'll now open the floor to Q&A. We have received quite a number of questions. So a huge thank you to everyone who has sent in a question. But due to time constraints, we might not be able to get through all of them. So I apologize in advance. So let's go to the first question. What is the recommended approach in bonding unrelated cats?
So this is, I assume the person asking the question means if they have a cat already in their home and they want to bring another cat into the house, so the cats don't know each other and they haven't got that social bond. That's what I'm assuming they mean. Yeah. Yeah. So as I said in the talk, that we're never going to be able to guarantee that those two cats are going to be bonded. I think we have to start off assuming they're not ever going to be bonded, because that is the most likely scenario. That's the most likely outcome of introducing two cats to each other, especially if they're both adults. If one or both of them are kittens, then like young kittens, then you might have more success of them becoming socially bonded because of the way feral colonies are comprised and are created. But if we're bringing in two adolescents or two adult cats and introducing them to each other, then yes, I think we have to assume that they're not going to bond. So we need to make sure that we have plentiful and well-distributed resources around your house. So if they don't bond, they can access those resources without feeling really distressed in the company of the other cats. But we can introduce them gradually and carefully with lots of scent swapping to help reduce any stress that they might feel when they come into contact with each other in the household. So I would always recommend using that scent swapping, if possible, before the new cat's even brought into the house. If you don't have that luxury, then try to keep the cat in another room, a separate room, and do the scent swapping for a good few days at least. What I would advise against is using any kind of caging system to introduce a new cat into a household. So what a lot of people might do is bring the new cat into the main living area of the house, put them in a cage or a crate so that they can see the other cats can see them, they can smell each other, but the new cat is safe. They might be safe from injury, but they're not safe from that horrible feeling of distress and feeling threatened. So I would strongly advise, if you're bringing a new cat into the house, into your home, to try to keep them physically separated. That will help them. That will obviously avoid physical injury, but that the lack of visual contact, the not being able to see each other, will also help them not only get used to the new house and your new surroundings, they'll get used to you, used to the smell of the home, but it'll also take that pressure off them from visually being able to see the other cats, because they will feel very threatened around new cats that they don't know or that they don't have that social bond with. So hopefully that's given you some extra information there.
Yep, definitely. We'll move on to the next question. What is your advice in reducing and preventing redirected aggression in social cats? For example, when they see or smell a stray near their home.
This is really difficult. I think if they are, so this would, redirected aggression is more likely to happen if they see or smell another cat through a window or a glass door. So if you have a glass door leading out to the communal corridors, or if you're on the ground floor and maybe you've got windows opening out onto the sort of the communal areas outside, and they're constantly seeing other cats passing, then what I would recommend is trying to block their visual access to the outside, at least at the height where they're going to see another cat passing. So you can be very creative in how you do this, but you can buy sticky back. Well, it's not even sticky. It's I can't think what it's called, but you can buy adhesive sheets that stick onto your window through static. You can also get these things like you can buy them for laptop screens, but so they're not sticky, they're not adhesive, but they just use the static between the two surfaces to stick on, so it's easy to remove if you want to remove, and they can be see-through as well, so transparent, so you can still allow sunlight into your house, but they're just maybe a different color, or they're a bit cloudy, so the cats can't actually see through them. So you can remove them whenever you want, but as long as there are other cats causing your cat's stress, you can put them up on your window. You can also buy sort of fake frosting at Christmas time, maybe, to, you know, that's meant to look like snow or snowflakes or something like that. So you could spray that onto your window as well. So anything that's easy to remove or wash off, I'd advise you to use that on your windows or on glass doors to stop the visual contact. There is a chance that another cat outside might be spraying on your doors or windows, and that smell, I mean, we can sometimes smell it and it's really horrible, but from the cat's perspective, that's really threatening. It's not an unpleasant smell to them in the sense it is for us, because it just smells dirty to us, but for them, it's really threatening. So it's important that we get rid of any smell where another cat might have sprayed outside. So it's important that we use the correct cleaning products for that. So you can buy special products from the pet shop that is especially for cat urine or animal urine. And the active ingredients would be enzymes. So an enzymatic cleaner will really break down the smells of that urine to the point where the cat can't smell it. Because if we're using just normal household cleaner, it might stop smelling for us, because remember, our sense of smell isn't that good compared to a cat's. The cat will still be able to smell it if we're just using normal household cleaner. And if we use anything with bleach in it, it can actually distort the smell of the urine and just make that urine smell worse from the cat's perspective, because urine and bleach have very similar sort of chemical makeup. So it's important that we're using appropriate cleaning products to get rid of the smell, any urine smells that other cats might be depositing on our doorways.
Thanks, Jenna. The next question. What are your thoughts on using pheromones to manage cat behavior?
I think they definitely have their place. They're not a magic bullet, though. We should be following all of the other tips and advice that I've given. So, you know, if we have a multi-cat household and our cats aren't getting on well, plugging in a pheromone diffuser isn't going to solve all your problems. We still have to make sure that the resources are well distributed around the house. You know, the cats aren't being forced to come into close contact with each other, that if they have to, they have the opportunity to choose whether to be around another cat or not. If we plug in the diffuser and the sources of stress or threat are still there, then what we might actually see happening is the cat sprays urine on top of the diffuser to mask the incorrect message that that's giving off. So the diffuser is giving out a scent that tells the cat it's safe. This place is a safe place. You can relax. You can let your guard down. You can do all your vulnerable behaviors like eating and sleeping and grooming. But if there's an obvious source of stress within the environment, like another cat that they're not socially bonded with, then the diffuser is giving out the wrong signal. So a lot of cats actually replace that signal with the correct one, which is a urine mark that tells them this is actually an area to be worried about. There is a potential threat in this area. And the smell of the urine reminds them to be vigilant in that part of the house. So yeah, it's not a magic bullet. It should be used in conjunction with all the other tips that I've given you today.
Thanks, Jenna. The next one is for multi-cat households. Will a multi-cat household with more than one social group eventually become one bigger social group given enough time, or are social groups generally quite stable?
That's a really good question. And of course, there's always the exception to the rule, and you know, anything is possible. But I think if they don't form social bonds quite early on, after you've gone through that sort of careful scent swapping, or unless they've grown up from a very young age together, I think it's unlikely that they will form social bonds with each other. I think you have to expect that they won't ever form social bonds, those two different social groups that are joined together. If you're lucky, they will, and it's more likely to happen if you keep that social pressure off them. So you make sure that there's no competition over resources, that there's no social pressure from other cats that they can see or smell through doors and windows, that you yourself are handling them in a way that respects their preferences. So if you can keep all other sources of stress to an absolute minimum within their lives, then you're setting them up for success. Really, you're going to give them the basic tools that they need to form social bonds with other cats. But if there's any stress or any competition within the household, your chances of that happening are going to decrease. But I think, I would never guarantee that any two social groups of cats would ever come together and form one.
Okay, the next one involves dogs. In your experience, does having a dog in a cat group affect the group dynamics?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I've not had that one before. Yeah, potentially. Any social individual within a group can impact the dynamics of the other relationships within that group, whether it's another cat, a human, or a dog. We quite often see cats completely change their own individual behavior, but how they interact with others when the teenager goes off to university, or when a new baby arrives in the household, or one of the cats in the household dies, or if you do get another dog, that can really significantly change behavior and social behavior. So yeah, the short answer is yes. I think it can definitely affect things, and not necessarily for not in a negative way. Cats and dogs can get on really well together. Again, if we're bringing a dog into a household with cats or a cat into a household with dogs, we can use that same scent swapping introduction program to try to increase the chances of them bonding with each other. And we might have to be a bit more careful with the dog, especially if it's a larger dog, that we can keep them under control and they're not going to chase the cat and scare the cat, or maybe even physically injure the cat. So we have to be careful there. But they can certainly live together harmoniously. And I've met lots of cats and dogs who really love each other. And if one dies, then the other one can be, really, they can show signs of grieving. So they might actually really miss their friends, whether that's a playmate or a nice comfy bed, because you quite often see cats sort of curled up in or on a dog. So they can miss each other. But sometimes they are quite glad when the other one's gone. It just depends on those individual relationships.
Thanks, Jenna. The next question is on space. In your view, how many cats would you think is maximum in a typical Singapore apartment to ensure good welfare? So say about 100 square meter apartment.
Oh, I hate it when you guys give me square meter, because we don't measure our houses.
Square feet? About 1,000 square feet?
Yeah. Well, I've been in your some of your apartments, so I kind of have an idea of what they look like and how big they are. So I think rather than go on meterage, it probably is, well, meterage is important, like square meters is important, but I think also the number of rooms that you have is important, and also how the layout of the rooms as well. So the apartment I've been in, there was quite a large living area with a very short corridor with the bedrooms coming off that corridor. So to get to any of the bedrooms, if there was one cat at the start of the corridor, all the other cats wouldn't be able to access the bedrooms. So the other bedrooms almost become obsolete because they can't be accessed at ground level. But obviously the owner of that house could use elevated walkways to allow the cats to pass that cat blocking access to the corridor to access the bedrooms. So that's one way around it. So that opens up the house, the layout of the house, to all of the cats in the household. But if you weren't willing to put up shelves, or if your cats maybe weren't able to access them, maybe because of their breed or their age or other mobility issues, then that would be more difficult. And it also depends on how much you've got in your house as well. So if you've got loads of furniture in your house, then there's less room for all of your cat resources. So whether that's bowls or litter boxes or scratching posts So it's going to be more difficult for you to separate those resources, the more human stuff that you have in that space as well. If it was an empty room that didn't have tables and sofas and cabinets and things in the way, then you'd probably be able to have more cats in that space because you'd be able to put more cat resources and spread them out. So there's no easy answer at all. It really does depend on your particular layout, how many rooms you have, whether you're willing to clear the tops of furniture, how much stuff you've got in there. So yeah, if you want more cats, then get rid of all your stuff and build shelves. That's my advice.
Very well answered, Jenna. Okay, for the next question, in a single cat household, and if the owner needs to go overseas, do you think it would be too stressful for the cat to have to be put up in a cat hotel?
This is something I personally really struggle with, actually. And it's all too tempting to never go on holiday because you don't want your cat to feel any distress. I think there's no easy answer. There's probably 3 different options, and each option might suit individual cats better than the other options. So the first option is for someone to come to your home and cat sit. So that means that the cat stays within their familiar environment. So everything looks the same, everything smells the same. The only difference being the person that's looking after them, and their routine might be a bit different. So cats can be creatures of habit. They can, they learn when they get fed, they learn when they get played with, they learn when they can get attention from the owners, or when their owners are going to be out at work or out at the shops. They do learn to expect things at certain times. So a new person coming into the house might be a little bit scary if they're not well socialized, but also they might not meet the cat's expectations in terms of a routine. But everything else, and most crucially, the cat's scent profile, is maintained when you have a cat sitter come into your home. You could also think about taking your cat to a friend's house or family member's home, if they don't already have their own cat or dogs, so that they can look after them. Everything will be different, all the smells, the layout, the people, everything will be different, but at least you've got a trusted person looking after your cat. Maybe that person has met your cat before, maybe they come over quite often and your cat already has a close bond with that person. So that can, I think, take the stress off you a lot, because you know who's looking after them. You know that they're in a home environment. You know that they can, once the person gets home from work in the evening, they've got, a good few hours to spend with your cat, entertaining them, playing with them, giving them a fuss. But you might not have access to someone like that. It's quite difficult, especially if you're already a cat lover, to not already have friends who are all cat lovers and have cats in their house. So that can be difficult. So then your third option is a boarding cattery. And this is probably my least preferred option, because everything is new. The environment, the smells, the people, the routine is completely different from your cat's perspective. There are other cats everywhere, so your cat will be able to hear them and smell them, which is really threatening for them. But it's very convenient, and as long as you do your research properly, they will be well cared for in terms of being fed and having their sort of physical needs looked after. But depending on how busy they are, they might not be able to actually spend much time with your cats or playing with them or entertaining them. And if your cat's not very confident around people, they wouldn't want that anyway. So if the staff do want to try to interact with your cat, then they might not recognize that your cat's actually quite scared and don't want that interaction. But if you have a really confident, friendly cat, then they might actually get on really well in that environment. Although if they're that friendly, then they would probably miss having someone be able to spend more time with them. But if you might have access to a really great boarding cattery where the staff can spend loads of time with your cats. So they're the different things to think about, and see what options are available to you and what would suit your individual cat's needs.
Thanks, Jenna. We'll take one last question. Sometimes my cat follows me around the house, meowing, and bites my leg all of a sudden. How do we find out what the cat wants?
Okay, so this is one of the ones that's really hard for me to answer because that's a very individual question. Generally, if a cat's following you around, my assumption would be that they're wanting something. They might want you to stroke them, they might want you to play with them, they might want you to feed them. Or I have an elderly cat who has kidney issues and she wants fresh water all of the time. So we need to replace her water sort of every 15 minutes or so. It's a bit ridiculous actually, but she really gets quite demanding for fresh water. So, you know, they could be asking you for anything by following you around. They're just trying to get your attention. So you have to try to work out what your individual cat is actually wanting from you. The reason they're biting you might be, well, they might have learned that's a really good way to get your attention because otherwise you just ignore them. So you've actually taught them, you have to bite me before I give you what you want. Or it might be frustration, that they're getting so frustrated that you're not giving them what you want, that it's almost like a redirected aggression type thing, that they're getting quite hyped up and they have to get this energy out of them, and biting you is one outlet for that. So that could be another reason. Biting might make them feel better with that feeling of frustration, and depending on how you respond, it might reinforce that behavior as well. Your cat might also be feeling ill or in pain, so I would definitely take them to the vet and just make sure there's nothing medical going on with them that might lead to that behavior, because sometimes biting behavior or aggression can be directly linked to an underlying medical condition. So definitely take them to the vet, but otherwise try to work out what it is that they're wanting and maybe preempt it before they start biting you. And also think about your response when they are biting you. Are you in any way encouraging it or reinforcing it? So I would definitely try to work out what they're wanting, preempt it before they start to follow and bite you. But it's not an unusual one, but it's not that common, I think, and there could be lots of different reasons for your cat doing it. So I would definitely see your vet and go from there.
Thank you so much, Jenna, and thank you to everyone who has submitted a question today. I'm sorry if I didn't cover all of them. We've come to the end of the webinar on social behavior of cats, and we hope that you managed to gain some useful tips on how you can better bond with your cats. Head over to our Facebook page, Animal Buzz SG, for more educational content on animal ethology, and like for regular content. If you did not manage to catch yesterday's session, you can also watch it on the NParks Singapore YouTube page. Once again, thank you for your time this evening, and we hope that you have enjoyed the webinar, and a very good night. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jenna. If you don't mind staying back for a little while.
That's fine. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.